You know, it's very strange. You sort of feel like a fossil that has been found someplace buried, and now, almost 70 years later, we're talking about it.
Thomas Buergenthal är namnet på en judisk pojke som överlevde nazismens koncentrationsläger för att senare i livet utnämnas till bland annat domare i FNs kommitté för de mänskliga rättigheterna. Sedan år 2000 är han också domare vid den internationella domstolen i Haag. Thomas väg mot en juridisk karriär har varit lång, men som han nämner i sin självbiografiska bok Pojken som överlevde förintelsen, så har han genom hela sitt liv alltid haft turen på sin sida. Han är en stor förkämpe för människors rätt till ett eget liv och har belönats med flera fredsutmärkelser för detta.
You know that I was born in what is now Slovakia in 34. But I was there only until about the age of 4, and then we were already on the run. Hitler had come to power in 33. Before we knew it, we were in Poland trying to get a visa to England. When we were ready to leave for England, they marched into Poland, September 1st, 39, when the war started. And from then on until 1945, when I was liberated, it was just a slow descent into hell.
Thomas och hans föräldrar bodde ett par år i det judiska gettot i Kielce innan de förflyttades till arbetsläger och slutligen Auschwitz-Birkenau.
Right on the arrival in Auschwitz, I was separated from my mother. I was with my father for a little while, and then he was sent away.
Det visade sig vara sista gången Thomas skulle få se sin far. Han dödades av tyskarna i koncentrationslägret Flossenbürg när bara några veckor återstod av kriget.
In January of 1945, the Soviet troops were already approaching, and the Germans wanted to get us to Germany. I ended up in the concentration camp of Sachsenhausen. By the time I arrived, I had frostbite, my hands, my leg. I eventually just lost some toes in there. When the Allies began to bomb Berlin, every night they flew over Sachsenhausen. And all I could think about was, if one of these big planes came and with a hook lifted up my barrack and took me to England or to America. We were very afraid when I was liberated because we expected that this was all a trick. So, and then when we were liberated and the Russians said, go, I had no idea where I was going to go. And all we were told was, go this way because the fighting is here. It didn't mean to me what it should have meant, and that didn't come until much later. About 2 years after we were separated, I found my mother. I went to school in Germany, which in retrospect was a very good experience because it contributed to my getting rid of my hatred and finding how important reconciliation was, because I think we will never stop the cycle of violence unless we learn to reconcile with people who do terrible things to us. I was treated very well. It was much harder for my mother. She was very pretty, which helped her always. She always could get away with things. It's true of pretty women generally, especially when they know it. She went to school in Göttingen, and when the Nazis came to power, her friends who'd been in school with them would not greet her. And when my mother came back after the war, they said, Gerda, where have you been all these years? It was very hard for my mother. For me, it wasn't really. But I knew that I couldn't stay there, because if I stayed in Germany, the past would always be with me. And then I left for the United States at the age of 17, supposedly for 1 year, and I never came back. In all the years since the liberation, even when I wrote the book, since then I never had any nightmare. And I think that's saved my mental health. You cannot have had this experience without it sort of affecting your whole life. But I never let it affect me in a way a lot of people were affected by it. And I think in part because I was very young. This was the life I knew. The life consisted of trying to stay alive and finding food to eat, staying warm if possible. Nothing else mattered. And also because after the camp, I have lived a very happy life. I couldn't have had a better life anyplace, I don't think. I am not a religious person at all. People say, oh, you were saved because of belief. I wish I could believe that. On the other hand, I ask myself, if that is so, why were so many other good people killed?
Efter många års slit har han jobbat sig uppåt och säger själv att han aldrig haft ett så bra jobb som nu.
In all my careers in America, I never had a toilet in my office. Now I have a toilet in my office. So if you ask me, what have you achieved? That's what I have achieved. I think when you get old, you suddenly see how beautiful certain things are in the world in which we live. You begin to appreciate life probably more anyway than when you're young. I realize now, for example, I look at nature and I look at the ducks that we have and the geese we have in the pond. My wife says I don't do anything else here but looking at the geese and the ducks.
För att man ska undvika liknande händelser som förintelsen tror Thomas starkt på utbildning.
When you look at the last 60 years, Germany has transformed itself really from a brutal, murderous Nazi state into one of the most democratic states in Europe. That was only possible because of education. You know, history never repeats itself altogether. We've had Holocausts. If you look at Rwanda, it's a Holocaust. So we have to work very hard to prevent it, but it can happen. And I also believe very strongly that no country has a monopoly on evil and no country has a monopoly on goodness. It's possible in every country. Things can happen, and before you know it, you have another dictator and another person who begins to commit these crimes.
Trots att Thomas vet att det fortfarande finns mycket kvar att göra är han hoppfull. Idag är han 76 år och har inga planer på att ge upp kampen än.